Cool. What is up, guys? Hope you guys are all enjoying your Tuesday evening. I'm hanging out with Brenda Bastel. Brenda, how are you?
I'm great.
So, for those of you guys that don't know Brenda, Brenda has been investing probably longer than you've been born. Brenda, how many decades have you been investing?
Since 1982.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. You probably weren't born.
I wasn't born yet. Yeah. So, what we're talking about today is cash flow. We are talking about how to maximize your property's cash flow. So a lot of investors out there will fix and flip for the intent of buying and hold properties to be able to create this passive income. Now you're hoping to use this passive income for many different reasons, whether it's to boost your lifestyle, whether it is to use for your retirement. Quick question for you, what makes you want to do, what got you into buy and hold properties?
I got into buy and holds way back when because I knew that was a great way to build wealth. And so way back in the 80s, my idea was just to buy one house per year. And originally I was going to sell 5 of them after 10 years, but I kept buying. I never like to sell. I like to keep accumulating.
Right.
So it certainly pays off when it comes to cash flow. Because now I have a lot more cash flow than I did in the 80s and 90s.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to have different reasons for why they're investing in real estate, but essentially cash flow is that amount of money that's left over after all expenses. So if you buy a property and you rent it out, you tenant it, the additional income that's left over after all expenses is your cash flow. So that's what when people are referencing cash flow, that's what it means. Our goal today is to help you unlock $100 to $250 in cash flow for any one of your properties. So this is a great exercise to do at least once a year to make sure that you're maximizing your profit. So we're gonna go through with Brenda Bastel, and we're going to talk about what are some of the things that she does to maximize cash flow. So one of the first biggest questions obviously is location, location, location. How important is it to have a good location when it comes to cash flow?
Well, I'd say location is really important, and that doesn't mean you have to go buy in expensive areas. I tend to keep my properties 20 minutes from my house, but I am picking areas that I know I'm going to be able to rent and I will get a decent tenant. I don't go too far northeast, for example, because I don't like the tenant profile out there. But I'm not buying, in Glenora. So I tend to pick those areas maybe right beside Glenora, or maybe I like some areas down on the north side because I live on the north side, and I don't buy in Mill Woods because it's a little too far away. So I tend to pick those areas that I know I'm going to get that decent tenant profile. And then I'm going to, hit my cash flow numbers.
Gotcha. And that's a great point on tenant profile because that's also something that's very, very important. In the upcoming videos, we're going to be talking about tenant profile, vacancy, and appreciation. So stay tuned to that. So when we talk about cash flow, now whenever we're looking for a particular property, so say a new investor is coming in and they want to start fresh and they want to find a property that has the best potential for cash flow. What does that property typically look like? Is it a certain size? Does it have a number of bedrooms? Is it suited? Is it unsuited? What do you see the most success in?
Well, personally, what I like is I like the 1,000 to 1,200 square foot bungalow with 3 bedrooms up, 2 or 3 down, and a double garage. That's kind of my ideal because I know that I'm going to get at least $500 positive cash flow from that. Now, I manage my own properties. Bear that in mind, but I just know from experience after all these years, I don't get those numbers from a condo. I don't tend to get them from a townhouse, and I don't tend to get them from a single family house. So and you can get those from apartments, but that's not my wheelhouse. I like suited houses and side-by-side duplexes.
Makes sense. And the reason why 3 bedrooms are going to cash flow more is that one of the main reasons why people tend to move from properties is because they outgrow the property. It's the natural evolution of someone in life, right? You're going to have a family. So this is also helping reduce the amount of tenant turnover and having less days vacant on the property. So having something of an envelope of 3 bedrooms up, 2 bedrooms down, a double garage puts you in a good opportunity to not only have 3 separate leases if you desire to do so, but it also helps you maximize the amount of cash flow. So, so let's talk about some different tips. So when it comes to cash flow, got my handy chalk. When's the last time you guys drew on a chalkboard? Thank God you're not a virgin. So when it comes to cash flow, how do we increase the amount of income and how do we decrease the amount of expenses If our expenses were zero, our income would be way better and our cash flow would be killing it. If our expenses are really high, which some properties have, it helps, well, it actually doesn't help. It actually reduces the amount of cash flow you see because it's hard to offset the income. So, how do we increase the most amount of income? Well, first thing we have is rent. So we know that the best potential, if your purpose is to have the best cash flow in property, heard it from Brenda today, 3 bedrooms up, 2 bedrooms down. Even if you find a 3 bedroom up, 3 bedroom down, even better. Double garage always does better than the single. So rent-wise, we already know what type of property that is. Okay, so we'll just do 3 up.
And just a point about a 1-bedroom basement suite, you're always going to get a more rent with a 2-bedroom basement suite. The 1 bedrooms, you just can only get so much, so I definitely prefer the 2-bedroom over a 1-bedroom basement suite.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can rent out the house, which is the 3 up, 2 down. Now you can also rent out, Brenda, you're ever rented out the garage separate?
Oh yeah, I have like double garages. They might go for $275 to $325. I rent out my single garages sometimes around $150, $175. Yeah, because sometimes the main floor, if I add in the garage, it's just a little too high for some people. So I give them the option. They can just rent the main floor, and then I'll rent the garage separately. And I just have no problem renting out garages.
It's surprising how much of a market there is. Again, think about storage facilities. There's a lot of storage facilities on the outskirts of Edmonton that make a killing. So when you have the ability to rent something that's more inner city, you're going to have a lot of neighbors that are going to appreciate that a lot more. Okay? So when we talk about garage, so with a 3 up, 3 down house, how much money do you think you get for standard rent? I'm gonna wreck my invitation here. So what do you think standard rent should be on a 3 up, 2 down property? Gross rent?
I would say $2,500.
Okay. So maybe
depends on the area, but let's say $2,500.
Okay. So about $2,500, and then if we rent out the garage, if it's a double garage, we can hit numbers between $250, $275.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna go $250 to be conservative.
And it might be slightly lower without the garage on these, or
so normally
like $2,300.
So if you're renting the whole house, we could say $2,500. If it's only if you're just renting out the house and no garage, do you want to say $2,400?
Yeah.
Okay. And another big note as well is the more leases you have on a particular property, typically the more cash flow you're going to have. So if you look at doing things like house hacking where you're renting out by the room, your ability for cash flow is much higher as well. So just like if you were to have 2 units in a house, you're going to cash flow better than 1 unit. If you're going to have 3 units in a house, you're going to cash flow better than 2. Same thing with 4 units in a house, you're going to cash flow better. And I actually have a house in St. Albert that has 3 units, and I'm hitting gross rents about $3,600 a month.
Yeah.
And that property is only worth about $330,000. So my ROI is like 15%.
Yep.
So let's talk about ways we can boost it. So 3 up, 2 down, about $2,400. We have a garage. Now we have other ways we can increase our rent. So we can do things like, what do you think about pets?
Well, pets, I love pets.
I love pets too.
I love pets, and I pretty much allow pets at most places. Now I'm charging $30 for a smaller pet, $50 for a large dog. That's kind of my, where I try to go in it. Now I sometimes modify that depending on the person. Sometimes I will charge just a flat fee, but it is extra income, and they are still responsible for any damages they do. So that can really add to your bottom line for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's going to increase the amount of demographic that's going to be willing to rent from you. So in a market that's harder to rent, where there's not as much of demand and there's lots of supply, this will help you, Brenda, stand out amongst the rest and have your unit rented fast.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're a clean landlord, you're likely going to take care of your pet. They're going to be clean as well. If you're a dirty tenant, you're likely going to have a dirtier pet.
And there are some like that.
Yes. So, okay, so we talked about this, pets. Now, I know some people also have things like sheds they'll rent out. I know most of you guys are like, what? You guys rent out sheds? It's more storage space. You can't get as much as a garage, but I've seen people get anywhere from $50 to $100.
Yeah. Yeah, I've rented out a shed for $50 at one of my properties. Because if I'm renting out the garage separately, I usually try to put a shed in. So, that's like and sometimes I'm charged $25. Sometimes I include it. It kind of depends.
Definitely.
But it's just another way to add, some income.
Definitely. So as you guys are seeing, the more ways that you guys start to add extra income by having more leases, the better the property's typically going to do. And then if you have a vacancy, you're not having to pay out of your own pocket to cover the expenses, which we haven't even gone through yet. There's a long list. Okay, so flat rate utilities versus paying by a percentage. So
yeah, definitely I do flat rate utilities. And usually what I find, yeah, people don't want to be concerned with having to go hook up their own utilities, especially in suited houses. It's a big hassle in the beginning. In my early days, I used to have a main floor, hook them up, and then they would try to collect from the basement. Well, that was a disaster. The basement didn't pay, and then I was stuck, having to pay this. Now, I just have the utilities in my name. I charge a flat rate, $250, $300 upstairs, $175, $225 downstairs. And usually, I'm making about 10% on that. It really depends on the tenant. They can be all over the place. Sometimes I have water bills. Like right now, I don't know if anybody's noticed, water bills have gone up because people are at home. So you do have to be careful and monitor your utilities to make sure, you're collecting enough.
that's a great tip. So you landlords out there that are charging a flat rate, have you checked with the utilities if you're on a flat rate? Have they gone up, and have you changed that to reflect the amount of at-home activity? Because if you haven't, there you go, I just saved you some money.
And I put in a clause in my lease that if there's a spike in the utilities, I have 14 days, I can modify that rate they're paying. So
Awesome.
That might be an idea to put in your leases.
Okay, so what you're saying is, so what a good way for those of you guys to get started, for whether you're a brand new landlord or if you're currently charging a percentage, 60% up, 40% down, whatever it may be, take a look at an annual view of what your utilities are. Maybe add 10% for fluctuations and any increases. Find out what that average is. Charge that on a monthly basis. Is that kind of a good way to go about it?
That's what I do.
Okay. Now, one thing that I recommend that you guys can do that also adds to less tenant turnover, or at least less tenant turnover in the months that you don't want it. I got a question for you guys. What are the worst months to rent a property? What do you guys think? Add to the comments below, what are the worst months that you never want to have a vacancy? We already know. It's the cold months. We know that in the cold months, nobody wants to move. So one thing you can do is you can do a rebate program. So myself, just like Brenda, I have my tenants on a flat rate utility bill. So every single month, they know exactly how much they need to pay. So when it comes to their calculations, their accounting, they already know their expenses. There's no surprises. That's great. Now, as of March 31st, if they are still occupying my property by March 31st, there's a rebate that can be had. So if they end up overpaying by, say, $70 throughout the year, they can actually get that money back as of April 1st, but they have to be tenanting my property at that time. If they leave December 31st, boom, that rebate is gone. So not only is that a nice little incentive, but that's a nice little treat to your tenants, knowing that you're actually working with them. So it's a win-win, and we're always about the win-win.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I don't do that, but I think sometimes I do. I'll go after a year. I look at their, what they paid, and I will give. But I have so many that's just a daunting task for me. But I think it's a great idea. It's just another thing that you can add some value for your tenants.
Definitely. Okay, so these are other ways. And how much money do you think you make off a utility bill? It's not going to be a lot. You can make like 15, 20 bucks or something.
15, $20.
So I'll say 20 bucks. So for any of you guys that want to maximize the amount of income on any of your properties, not only make sure you're purchasing at a good location so you can tenant the properties, and that fan is loud, so if you can't hear us, we're just going to have to start yelling, I think. But look at where, are you maximizing your potential by the envelope of the house? Is it large enough to accommodate this many bedrooms? Do you have a garage you can rent out separate? If your house is near transit, renting out a garage separate is not an issue because the tenants typically use transit anyways. The bus systems, LRT, pets, shed, boom. Expenses. You ready to go on expenses?
Sure, yeah.
So how do we manage expenses? We're going to start with a big one. So utilities. So if you have your tenants on a flat rate utilities bill, how do we lower the amount of utilities that we're actually spending?
Well, I think that really comes down to that, making sure that you have an up-to-date property. I mean, my preference right now is I prefer to buy a property, get it, put in a brand new main floor, brand new basement suite, put in the insulation, all new windows. So my envelope is going to be much better than, say, that older property that has old windows, the insulation hasn't been upgraded, because you're gonna get killed on the utilities. So, if you're first starting out, maybe that's not possible, but that is something that over time, you might wanna kind of make sure you're maintaining those properties, because it's gonna, I'm working with somebody right now that for 10 years has not maintained his property, and he's suddenly getting a lot of expenses because they've all piled up. So that's just something you need to do like on a regular basis.
So if our job is to increase this and decrease this, you can look at things like Brenda was saying, insulation, windows, even LED lights.
Yeah, LED. I change everything to LED too.
Motion sensor lights as well. So if you have common area space, that area will,
Yeah.
you'll notice they'll keep the lights on because they don't really know whose responsibility it is. Remove that confusion, do motion sensor lights. All these little things may seem like very small items in a month, but if you start to look over a year, this is where you can start to see an extra couple $100 a year. And everyone can probably use an extra $100 a year. I know I could.
Yeah,
So, awesome. So that's one way that we can talk about managing our expenses when it comes to utilities. I'm gonna watch our board here.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more expensive.
So we also have things like mortgage, we have things like property tax, and again, we're not going to be able to manage everything, but our job is to be able to manage whatever we can. We also have things like vacancy. So whenever we're looking at cash flow numbers, if you have any vacancies, that's going to eat out your cash flow numbers. Property management is usually about 10% that you'll end up paying somebody.
And I think one of the biggest killers of income is vacancy. I'm really proactive when I do my own management, so I'm very proactive, getting ads in, showing them right away, and keeping up the curb appeal of the place. Like, don't be showing a property that's got grass that's, a foot high, because that's going to be a deterrent.
Definitely, I completely agree. So vacancy are things, just like Brenda said, is keep the property tip-top shape, buying areas that are typically more desirable. So think about infrastructure around your property that's going to create more of a demand for people to live there. So things like the U of A, schools, shopping malls, hospitals. Just think about where you want to live. Where would you want to live? Because there's a good chance that someone else will want to live there as well. And that's a good way of decreasing your vacancy. Now, if you keep your clients or tenants happy, you should have very little vacancy.
Yeah.
But if you do, you want to be in a desirable location. So we just got that checked off. Mortgage, comes down to shop around, get the best rate you can.
Sometimes that's just whatever you can get.
Property tax, if you look at the City of Edmonton website and that it seems like your home evaluation is way out to lunch, you can dispute that. But that's a lot of things that people probably won't end up doing.
Yeah.
Property management, we know is about 10%.
10%. Yeah.
So one thing I'll talk about is a lot of people don't like to tenant their own properties because they don't want to go through the interviewing, it feels cumbersome, they don't want to know, they just don't know what to do. They don't mind the day-to-day management, but they don't want to find the tenant. So we have companies out there like Block 31, there's other companies out there that will just do vacancy filling. So if you hate that part of the job, just hire someone for that part of the job and do what you like to do. And you'll probably save yourself a lot of money. So,
That's good too.
insurance, any tips on insurance that you can think of?
Well, I mean, it's basically shopping around. Right now, insurance rates are pretty high. I mean, I get a discount because I got a number of properties, but it's still high. So you just have to shop around for that one.
Yeah,
That's,
completely agree.
yeah.
Repairs.
Yeah, repairs, that's a big one because, once you get into this business, that's going to be something you're going to have to do. And I really work on that one a lot. I do not want to overpay for repairs. So a lot of times, I've got a team now, but, sometimes, hey, I don't have a painter right now because, he's left town. So I don't want to go out and hire a big company that's going to charge me a lot. So I go back to, sometimes I just go to Kijiji, I will post something, maybe somebody has a painter they know, but I don't want to overpay. This is a rental property, but I don't want to slum the job either. So, you're going to have to interview some people when it comes to that.
Makes sense. And now there's also proactive repairs as well. So one thing that I recommend is visit your property twice a year or have someone else do it.
Yeah.
Spring and thaw, or sorry, I guess freezing. Anyways, you want to visit your property like in the spring as well as right before winter in the fall. 2 reasons why. Is moisture is usually the #1 killer for most properties. So if you notice things like seals are starting to break, or your eaves troughs are getting full, or the downspouts are leading the water straight into the foundation, these are all things that can be preventative maintenance that will reduce the amount of repairs that you'll have to do on your property. I promise you, by going through a basic checklist of even just looking for water damage or potential water damage, it will save you thousands of dollars. And guess what you end up more with? The money you want to spend. Again, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because of increasing your lifestyle, because you want more trips? You want to be able to spend more time with your family as you see your kids grow? Are we looking for retirement? Are you saving up for a Lamborghini? So again, think about why we're doing this. Figure out, why is that fire? Why are you willing to spend all this time and energy into this? Don't forget about the meat and potatoes of why you're doing this, and easy things by managing these properties and even just doing a basic analysis like this of expenses versus potential income on each property. This could easily gain you $100 to $250 a month.
And I mean, you should have a spreadsheet on all of your properties so that you can understand, what is your cash flow? Because it's different than profit. You need to know what is coming in every month, because that's ultimately going to be important down the road. I mean, in the beginning, when I first started out, I had no cash flow. I admit it. I didn't know how to buy. I was just out there buying houses. But it became super important to me when I went through, 2008. I went through a few crashes, and that just about killed me. So now that I'm only buying for cash flow, and I'm only maximizing this to get the most cash flow out of every property, life is so much easier. And it's also so much easier when you have good quality properties, when they're maintained, they're renovated, and they're move-in ready. They're like a new house. And I think we were talking before, like the difference between buying new and buying I tend to buy 50s, 60s, 70s. They're older houses, but I'm gutting them. I'm making them new. And that model has just worked for me. Whereas buying a new place, I'm going to spend a lot more money. I'm not going to have quite the cash flow, but maybe in the long term, you're going to have, less deferred maintenance.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. So awesome. Yeah. I'm so happy we got to hang out for, I don't even know how long this was. I think it was like 15-20 minutes.
Yes.
But I'm so happy we got to hang out and go through this with you guys being here. So thank you guys very much. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Brenda. Brenda, what's the best way that people can reach you?
Well, you can text me, 780-446-3814.
For the note, we've never had anybody put out their number on Facebook Live. That is amazing. That is trust right there. So make sure you guys use that number wisely. Brenda is very, very good at what she does. Yeah. So thank you so much.
That was great. Awesome.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
See ya.